for education. We record this for educational purposes. Oh, and we have the
Sorry.
Bill's stopwatch. So, okay, well, welcome everyone to our Empathy Circle Facilitator Training orientation. And the purpose of this is it's an introduction and a meet and greet for taking part in the Empathy Circle Facilitation Training. And let me just give a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be covering is we're going to share the intention for the Empathy Circle Facilitator Training. We're going to have participant introductions. I'll give a short presentation on how to sign up for the training. A couple of people here have already done that. We'll have some Q&A about any questions you have about the training. I'll explain how to do the Empathy Circle. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review the videos. There's a 9-minute how-to video as well as a 24-minute intro video, which kind of helps orientate you, but we'll give a little bit of a refresher on how to take part in the Empathy Circle. And then we'll actually do an Empathy Circle, and we go for 2 hours, and at the last, about the last 10 minutes, we'll stop and just have a little debrief about our experience. And we have 8 people here, so we can actually do two Empathy Circles. So to begin with, let me just share the intention. Our intention we have for the Empathy Circle is more than just, just a practice. It's actually looking at having building a culture of empathy. So we really would like to build a culture of empathy here in our group, as well as in society in general. We're really trying to transform society and make it more empathic. And in short, what does that mean, the culture of empathy? It means that each person can, fully express themselves and be heard and understood to their satisfaction, and that we do that mutually too. And the practice we use is the Empathy Circle, which actually is based on mutual empathic listening. So to begin with, we just want to hear, a little bit from everyone who's here. Maybe you could just share your name, your location, where you're located, and maybe a little bit about why you want to be an Empathy Circle facilitator, just half a minute or so. And I can model it. As mentioned, I'm Edwin Rutch. I'm from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and I'm located here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And my reason for wanting to facilitate an Empathy Circle is I've been working for about 14 years on the topic of empathy. How do we create more empathy in the world? And I've just found that the Empathy Circle practice is like the easiest, most effective first step practice, sort of a gateway practice. It's really, and it can be learned easily, and becoming more empathic is a lifelong endeavor, but this is a really good first step practice. And so I personally would like to just spread it around the whole world. My goal is everyone in the world learns how to facilitate an Empathy Circle or take part in it and be able to facilitate it. And I just think that the world would be a better place, if people had that skill. And it's really my way of, contributing to the well-being of humanity, really. So that's a bit about me. Bill, would you like to go? I'll just choose people. And
yeah, I won't repeat. I certainly, I've been working with Edwin for almost 3 years now. I'm a retired special education teacher, and I want to, endorse what he just told you. And just to say that having to deal with a lot of trauma and things like that, I find that this is a way to really cut to the chase and actually proactively address emotional needs that are unaddressed. And I think that not only is that good for kids, but that's good for our world. And so that's why I'm trying to, spread the practice. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Would you like to call on others while you're just
sure.
Go and call on people?
I'll go around. Okay. Lucy, are you ready, or do you need a little time to get settled?
Hi, I'm Lucy from the old Quebec City in Canada. I have the privilege of speaking English.
Mhm.
so I can participate in this type of training. I am the executive director of the Restorative Justice Center in Quebec, in the city of Quebec. And we work with First Nations for the reconciliation with the church and non-natives.
Mhm.
And it's a really, really, really slow process. So in the meantime, I look for things where occasions to improve my practice.
Great. Well, welcome. Michelle.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, thanks for the invitation to the cohort and to the group. Yeah, I'm Michelle, and I'm based in Galway, Ireland. And I kind of drawn to empathy circles for two reasons. Like one, our family experienced a lot of trauma that led to kind of death of one of them's family members quite young. And it's made me kind of quite sensitive to, this need for empathy and for being like very, just very aware of that. And then from the other side of it, then I'm also very drawn to like conscious communities and yoga communities, and I feel like it'll go hand in glove. I think all of that like fits together. And to Edwin, what you were saying there about, it's what the world needs right now. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Karen, welcome back.
Hi, thank you. Nice to be back. So I'm Karen from London in the UK, and everything that Edwin said about empathy circles really resonates, about it being a real a gateway into so many conversations and a real gift to humanity. I'm a psychologist by background and a parent, and I'm particularly interested at the moment in the education system and the need to change the education system. I've just come from a meeting called Unschooling School, and they're very interested in this process, and they want to, so we'll have a chat, Edwin, Bill, about connecting them, because they're very keen to look at this process for having conversations with teachers, parents, students all together, trying to work out how we change the education system to be more conducive to the way it needs to be for children and for society. It really needs a massive transformation, but it needs to be done in a gentle way, and empathy circles is a perfect gentle way to get those kind of issues across. And any kind of activist movement, I think this is a key way to do it. So very, very happy to be learning how to facilitate and learn the process.
Great, Karen, thanks. Yeah, I'm working in that area, and so I'd love to have a conversation with you or anybody else about that. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Sonia.
Hello, Sonia, tuning in from New York City, and I've been studying nonviolent communication here in New York with the New York Center for Nonviolent Communication, and through that have an empathy buddy, and so have like a regular partnered empathy practice, but have never participated in an empathy circle. And I've just found it to be incredibly a very transformative practice for me as an individual. And then in my professional life, I do a lot of group facilitation work. So I was really drawn to this to kind of see how my kind of personal experience with an empathic-based practice could merge with my passion for group facilitation and how to kind of create spaces for healthy dialogue in group settings. Mostly in the workplace is where I work. My work is mostly in facilitating groups within their organizations. So happy to be here.
Great, welcome. Good to have you. Jennifer.
Yeah, hi.
Jennifer from the state of Oregon in the US, and my background is actually in organizational psychology, organizational development. So I too, kind of like Sonia, interested in bringing this back to the workplace, purposes of team building, conflict resolution, and recently, since my background, I do a lot of work obviously in human resources. And I've been getting calls from different organizations saying, hey, you know, we've got a lot of staff that are interested in just kind of starting groups where they can have conversations about their feelings, about the social unrest, about kind of processing through everything that's going on in the environment outside of work. Is that legal? Can we do it? And of course, you know, I mean, it's a sensitive topic, but yeah, we do want to provide spaces and dialogue. But I'm noticing that a lot of these groups are just kind of being left to their own devices. So when dealing with sensitive topics, I think without proper facilitation, without structure, we can sometimes create more damage than good in those sorts of settings. So I think being able to provide them kind of with a roadmap, some guidelines for those conversations would be really helpful to a lot of folks. So
Great. Great to have you. And Victoria.
Hello, I'm so glad that I can join all of you guys today. Empathy for me is just, it is just the way that I breathe. So it's a lifelong learning for me. And in my when I did my master's some time back in organizational leadership, systems thinking and design thinking, what I wrote about and what I studied was on the empathy. And so I have a background in human resources for numerous years. And also I'm an artist and designer. So kind of what I live by is cultivating empathy through creative interactions. And so having worked for museums and now I work at the state level in education, helping to drive a strategic plan with, you know, centering on DEI. Our work is around DEI and moving that along, and the norms of our organization and how we work around empathy. So my personal life, I do training. I love working with young people and doing empathy training. So did some work and some curriculum with a teacher in 5th grade around that for kids. And then training for adults. And so I see how it crosses over, you know, with music and art and all of that. So this is a lifelong experience for me, so that how might I give back and help other people have conversations, and in those difficult conversations. So what's happening now, and with young people trying to have those conversations in their school systems, and school systems, some of them not prepared to have kids. I have seen some tragic things that have happened through experience with, I have a nephew who's hanging out during this COVID time with auntie. So I even tried this model, that we're discussing today on him, to see how it works. He's like, oh yeah, okay. You sound like one of my counselors, you're listening, you know. So, and then had him model it back and work on it. So, so I am here because this is a commitment, you know, lifelong learning. So how I can share.
Great to have you. Welcome, Victoria. And I'll just make one quick comment. One of the people that works in the Empathy Circle is a musician, and he talked about the parallel between the Empathy Circle and music, in that you're listening and speaking at the same time. And so I think that that's a dynamic I just wanted to highlight.
No, that's a good one, because I just had a conversation with a drummer. And he was saying he was working with some couples and the communication. And I said, well, try this, try the listening part, because drumming is call and response. So he does African drumming. He's a master at that. So you're right on.
Great. All right, welcome. And I'll give it back to Edwin.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Yeah, for the Empathy Circle's really effective in families. So I do it with my family. We have a mixture of progressive and Trump supporters. So you can imagine, we've had empathy circles for like 4.5 hours in the family, kind of talking about just family issues. So it can be used in a lot of different contexts. So next, I just wanted to do a screen share here and share kind of a little bit of an overview of the training, just to give everyone a sort of a background in terms of the process for how to get involved in the training. And I'll just review the different screens here. Let me bring that up. Hopefully this can have the right one. Yeah, there we go. So this is our main landing page for the Empathy Circle Facilitator Training. This is on Facebook. And this is a good place to, I hope everybody has that link, a good place to just bookmark that. And it's the Empathy Circle Facilitator Training. You can see we have a little video here. This is one of the trainers, Lou, and Bill is the other one. Whoops. And this is just a video of us at UC Berkeley on the campus. These are UC Berkeley students, and we had a group that went, of our facilitators, we went there. We have this empathy tent that we set up in different locations, and we offer empathic listening and mediation, empathy circle practice. And here we're just holding some circles to sort of teach some students how to take part. So if you go to the site, you'll see these are the upcoming open orientation calls, which is what you're in right now. This is the call, and the next one will be in October 13 and October 20th. And you scroll down, we've got about 300 people so far interested in the training. And we have a little bit of an introduction, what the training is about, how we're forming cohorts of 4 to 12. The current one, well, I'll talk about that a little bit later. And here's just the steps for taking part. The first step is to, if you're on Facebook, you can join this event and just, click, join and, or going to this event. And that just is it's a good place just to keep up to date on, kind of the latest. We post kind of updates here. And then the next step is you can fill out this scheduling calendar. And this was initially a calendar. You'll see it kind of the dates and times that you have more available. And so we're trying to get a sense of when people's times were available. And you go through, I'll just show that. And you put your name and email there. We had different time zones, and then you could put a letter at the time zones that you have available. And then we're trying to see when most people have available so that we can schedule trainings. And then there's another link here. It's a review of the Empathy Circle training process on our empathycircle.com website. And it's a bunch of steps there that you can see on how to get involved in the training. There's a prerequisite to join training. You must have taken part in 3 or more empathy circles, and this counts as an empathy circle taking part in this. And we do make exceptions too, for people that have a lot of experience, and sometimes we'll say, well, I'll just do 1 or 2. And this, then you just get accepted by the trainers into the cohort. So we just kind of talk about the, about that. So that's a bit negotiable. Here's the list of upcoming orientation calls. That's today. Usually we have 2 or 3 orientation calls, and then we have 2 weeks for the training, and then another 2 or 3 weeks orientation, and then the training. So it's like usually one set of training, one training module per month right now. And as we get more people involved and more trainers, we're expanding that. So currently we're setting up for module cohort 5, and these are the dates for it. And if you can click through, there's a link here. You can click through to cohort 5, and you can see this is the people involved. And I see Victoria and others are here too on the wait list. So we're looking to expand this with having another facilitator, because we try to have a 1-to-4 ratio, 1 trainer to 4 participants. So we can sort of expand the size of the cohort by, adding another facilitator. So we're trying to do that so we can accommodate everyone for this next training. And then the next training after this, we've been meeting, usually the first several cohorts have been in the morning, our morning Pacific time, which is 10 a.m. Pacific. And the cohort 5, we did this one at a different time since we didn't have the afternoon time for Pacific time, which this is more, cohort 5 is more conducive to the time zones for the US to Australia, cohort 6 is kind of better time for the US and Europe time. So there's kind of some more info, you know, how to take part in the Empathy Circle, you know, the kind of just more information about the Empathy Circle, you know, why to participate, how to participate, and more about the training. So this is just a good place here to get started for getting oriented. If you go and click on the discussion area, it'll put you through to, you'll see there's a lot of different posts, you know, how to take part in the training, not in the training, in the basic Empathy Circle. That's for, you know, 25-minute intro. You just scroll down. This was last week's, you know, Jennifer and Karen, etc. You're up there. So we have a recording. And you can see already 150 people have watched it. So that's why we do it, because we post it. And yeah, that's 150 people that have kind of gotten a bit of an orientation. So they didn't have to take part in this. They could get a little bit of an introduction. And then we have posts, and there's just all kinds of, you know, various information there. So it's a good place to if you join, you know, just say your interest or join, you'll just get that up-to-date information. In terms of signing up for a cohort, there's some steps. If you go through to the sign up page, you know, again, you go through the steps to sign up, and there is an application we ask everyone to fill out. It just, you know, it'll be your email, your name, a little bit, you know, about you. Just want to be sure that you can make all the sessions. And then we just want to be sure everyone is familiar with the how-to, and you know, want to get an idea of how many circles you've taken part in, just so we can, you know, kind of incorporate that, and just some various questions for the application. So I think that's kind of the gist of it. You know, but the main thing is, if you start here, you know, all the information links from this site, and so that's the basic how-to. I don't know, can you think of anything else, Bill, that I should mention before I go into Q&A?
No, I can't. I think those are pretty much of the you have to. I guess just whether people understand the rules here. If anybody's new to it, maybe we can address that.
Which rules is that?
I mean, just the how-to of the Empathy Circle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll go into that before the. We'll do that before the Empathy Circle. We start the Empathy Circle. So, is there any questions or comments before we go into actually doing an Empathy Circle? Does that seem clear to you? Oh, yeah, Lucy, or
Yes, well, I'm glad you're going through these, you just went through these steps, because when I went on that like Excel page to sign up, put my name, I was wondering, because I didn't see any dates. So I guess there was a second page I was supposed to open to see that. So now I understand, because I didn't put any dates. I just put my name up.
Yeah. Well, that is more of a spreadsheet. We're trying to see, like, during the week, when do most people have available? And it turned out most people have available 10 a.m. Pacific, our time, which, you know, is different in every time zone, of course. So, and then it seemed that that's one time that a lot of people had available. And then the new time, the next cohort, we kind of saw, oh, it was sort of in our afternoon, 4 p.m. Pacific time. So that was just kind of helping us kind of see when, you know, people had available.
Yes, what I'm saying is that I didn't see where to put my availability. I only saw the place where I put my name.
Right. Let me put this.
On
let
the
me bring this
spreadsheet.
up.
So was there like 2 pages? Like sometimes on a spreadsheet, you have to go at the bottom and there's a second page that I have to click
what it
on,
is.
or?
Yeah, here's what it is you go here, the cohorts that are forming, you can see what cohorts there are. So this is cohort.
Yeah, I already went there.
Okay. So
I was on the page where I signed up.
So did I?
To
so
open
you
the
could,
page like you did before?
Oh, okay. So that's cohort 5. And then you would, oh, here, yes, you would have added your name down here. I see. Yeah.
No, there were many lines, many columns
That's
on that
the,
spreadsheet.
right, that's the,
So I just put it under, I just put it under where there were less names. So
oh, okay. Oh,
I
right.
didn't see this calendar. You see what I mean?
Right, you didn't see this. So yeah, so here what you would have done is you're in the Eastern time, and you would have said, well, Monday I have this time here available. This is where I can,
How do I go there? How do I go there?
oh, you just
I
scroll.
just scroll down?
Yeah, you just scroll down.
Okay, okay. Well, I guess I just didn't see that show up. So I'll go
Okay,
back and
sure,
I'll
yeah.
find it. Yeah.
But the main thing,
Thanks. It's really well organized.
we're trying, it's a work in progress. Thanks for your patience, you know, as we kind of refine the process. So the main thing though is right now you can see what cohorts we actually have available, and you can see if those kind of fit for your time. But the cohort 5 is full at this moment. So it'll be cohort 6 is the next one. So is there anyone else? Karen?
Yeah, I've just put my name down for cohort 6, but I didn't see where the application part was, you know, you put the extra details.
I just created it and didn't create an application yet, so there is no application for that one. Yeah, in a week or so there'll be a link to it. Yeah, so you're right. There's no application form yet. I have to copy it and sort of create that. We use Google Forms for that. But if I have your email, I'll email you. Yeah, when it's up there. Yes, Sonia.
Yeah, other than this, how do we find out about more opportunities to participate in empathy circles?
Yeah, that's a good question here. So let me put the link in here to our calendar and also share it. So there's a link there to upcoming empathy cafes or empathy circles. And I'm loading it right now, so I'll actually share it. So you click through on that. That's another good link to the bookmark, because that's the upcoming cafes. And it's loading on my computer a little slowly. So you'll click through there, and let me share that.
Can I, while you're doing that, Edwin, just give props for the Empathy Cafe?
Give props, sure.
Yeah, I participated, just for those of you who haven't, I participated in one. I think they're on Fridays, and they have kind of a general topic. And then obviously, similar to the empathy circles, you're also able to talk about anything that's kind of alive or present for you in the moment. And it was really cool. There really wasn't much of an orientation in terms of kind of working out logistics and things. We basically just separated into groups with a facilitator, went into individual rooms, and we were able to exercise that skill set in the process for like, you know, an hour and a half or 2 hours straight. So really interesting. And again, a real diverse group, people from all over the world. And I just found it really enjoyable and really helpful practice.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So yeah, if you go here, you'll see this is all the events that we have. We've been working with Extinction Rebellion. There's a couple of events here for Extinction Rebellion. This is the Friday group that Jennifer was just mentioning. We have a different topic, is why is a culture of empathy important? It was like the values of a culture of empathy. Like what did you see as the core values, you know, like mutuality or mutual empathy or openness or listening, etc., or authenticity. And here we're going to explore the why is a culture of empathy important. So this is another way to get your, whoops, hit the wrong button, sorry about that. So this is another way to get experience in taking part in the empathy circle. There's a, there's a facilitator support group. If you're, every Friday, we have a facilitator support group for anyone. If you're wanting to hold empathy circles, we want to support you in doing that. So you can come, you get to that, you get 15 minutes to share, you know, where you want to hold a circle, if you want to do it in the school or within a family, and you just share it and you can get feedback from other facilitators. So we really want to support you in that. As mentioned, we're working with Extinction Rebellion. the environmental group, and they've really taken this practice on as an activist group, and they hold they do quite a few empathy circles, you know, all around the world for them. There's an empathy circle on exclusion, which is on Saturday mornings. And also we're working on a design team to design the training. Right now we have, you know, the module 1, but we want to create an empathy circle MOOC, you know, a massive open online course. So if you're a trainer or, you know, facilitator or designer, like Victoria, if you're a designer, we'd love to have you take part, you know, in that design as we, you know, kind of build out this training and really make it accessible. I want to make it just very accessible to everyone. And you can also, you know, you do the training, you hold some empathy circles, and then you can become a trainer too. Well, we want to have the full curriculum that you can use to train other people. So just like Bill and Lou are facilitating this training, we would like you to be able to facilitate it and really kind of just spread the practice. So any other questions, comments? Okay, so we'll go into the empathy circle, another place to, you know, just talk about any questions. You can bring up any comments or questions. Is there anyone that hasn't seen the how-to? I just want video. I'll be sharing again the process, but just so everybody's seen it. Okay, so I'll just give a very quick, you know, brief introduction then for the empathy circle process. So in this process, we're going to divide into 2 groups because we like to have about 4 people in a circle. It gives a good amount. You know, if it's 3, you don't get quite many perspective. If you get 5 or 6, you don't get to speak as much. So 4 is kind of an ideal number, but it can be flexible. So we're going to have 2 circles of 4. And, you know, we'll have a topic, and the topic is just what is your experience of the empathy circle, or why do you want to be an empathy circle facilitator, or anything that's alive for you. You know, if you've just had a fight with someone and you want to process that, you know, talk about that, or something going on, you know, for you, you can, you know, share that. That's always an option. So in the circle, there's a couple of roles. There's the speaker and the active listener. So one person will be the speaker. For example, if I was a speaker, I select who I'm going to speak to. I speak to Bill, and I start sharing, you know, something, you know, perhaps about why I like facilitation. I share maybe for half a minute or an idea or 2, and then I pause, and then Bill reflects back his understanding of what I said till I check, did I feel heard and understood? Is he really getting what it is that I'm saying? And if not, I just say it again in perhaps other words, you know, to kind of make it easier for him to follow what I'm saying. If he did understand it, then I continue what I'm saying. I pause again, get a reflection, check, you know, speak some more, get a reflection. And we have 5-minute turns, so you can go for 5 minutes, and someone in the facilitator will keep time, and they'll hold up a little time card just to let you know that the time is up. Or if you just speak for a couple, yep, there you go, very fancy time card. Thanks, Bill.
It's artisanal.
Yes.
Okay.
And yeah, and then if you only speak for a couple minutes, you have nothing else to say, you can say, I feel fully heard, or something like that, just to indicate that, you know, you've been heard to your satisfaction. And then it becomes the listener's turn to select who they would like to speak to. And then they speak, and, you know, we do the same process. And then once they're done, it's that listener's turn to select the other person. So it just continues for the time allotted. You know, we'll have about an hour, a little bit over an hour, you know, for an hour and 10 minutes or so for this circle. And then one couple of tips is, you know, be sure to pause often so that the listener can reflect back. And sometimes, you know, people go on for a couple of minutes and it's a lot. And as the listener, you're thinking, oh, I'm never going to remember to reflect all this. As I get older, my memory's going too. So I know, so you can ask for a pause. It's like say, oh, can you just pause and let me reflect back? So you can't interrupt, you know, on that occasion. But otherwise, as a listener, you're only wanting to reflect back what it is that you hear from the speaker. You know, you don't want to ask questions. You don't want to add your own comments and like that. So we're only trying to hear the speaker to their satisfaction. And that's really the goal, is for the speaker to really be heard and understood to their satisfaction. So that's kind of the basics of it. The rest we can, you know, just you kind of pick it up as we go along. So with that, let me find where's our breakout room. So Bill will facilitate one circle and I'll facilitate the other. And I think we're ready to just get started. And here we go. Okay. So we'll see at about, we'll come back to the full circle at about 10 till the top of the hour. So.
Getting nervous for a minute. I thought we might be left to our own devices.
Takes a minute to. So we're ready to start. I'll keep time. Whoever would like to start, you can speak to me if you like to model it. And the topic again is why do you want to be a facilitator, or what's your experience of the Empathy Circle, or kind of anything that's alive for you. So who would like to start?
I can go first.
Okay.
So Edwin, do I have to ask you to be the active speaker?
Yeah, you can
or?
ask me. I just to model it, I can be
Okay.
it to start with. So yeah, I'm listening.
Great. So as I mentioned in our introduction, I have an empathy buddy who I talk to once a week. And a lot of that time is has allowed me to develop an understanding of what it means to kind of practice empathy, what empathy is and what empathy isn't, and to have the felt experience of what it really feels like to be heard.
Okay, what I'm hearing there is you have an empathy buddy, and that experience is really giving you a sense of what it feels like to be heard, you know, just so how this process works.
Yeah. And at the same time, I'm facilitating a lot of groups for in my work life. Often, by the time a group is bringing in a consultant or a facilitator to help them with dialogue, it's because folks do not trust that they're able to share safely or be heard within that space. So I'm finding myself in lots of situations where there isn't that kind of relief and trust in the process when engaging in dialogue.
So I'm hearing that you are facilitating groups, or it sounds like in the workspace, and they have some problems, and they bring in someone to help with the dialogue, and that seems to be the sort of the main problem, is sort of a lack of listening and empathy, and the felt experience of people being heard in those groups.
Yeah, and I think what brought me to this training is because for me, my experience with empathy came out of nonviolent communication, which was a much more elaborate training than I'm able to offer often to the clients that I'm working with. So I'm curious how the practice of empathy can be brought into a situation where folks haven't already gone through an NVC training.
Okay, so you've done NVC training and you're just identifying it's quite an elaborate sort of process to learn to do NVC, and other people in these groups haven't done that process, and it sounds like you're interested in how empathy circles could be used in these situations.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems really important to me to be able to connect to what matters to people as a facilitator, to be able to reflect that back, to support people in being able to identify what's important to them, and to be able to do that without the kind of background framework of feelings and needs.
Yeah, so you really want to be able to hear people, and it sounds like you want to be able to do that without the extensive, training and feeling and need. So maybe looking for something simpler, more accessible.
Yeah.
And kind of maybe wondering like how empathy circles could be used for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Curious about this model. Yeah.
So some curiosity, of this process model.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel
Okay.
heard.
All right. Then restart the timer. Jennifer, can I speak to you?
Absolutely. Happy to listen, Edwin.
Okay, so yeah, NVC and the empathy circles is based on the same work of Carl Rogers. So, Carl Rogers developed empathic listening kind of in the therapeutic, context. And the founder of NVC was Marshall Rosenberg, who was a grad student under Carl Rogers. So this is the exact same roots, NVC and what we're doing here has the same roots.
So I'm hearing actually you're kind of expanding on some of the things that Sonia had mentioned when she was speaking to you, just regarding her experience in nonviolent communication, and kind of drawing the parallels between that and empathic listening, which are both come out of the theorist Carl Rogers. And NVC was actually the work of one of his graduate students. And that you identified that these two things actually come from the same roots. So just kind of drawing those parallels.
Yeah, it's the empathic listening process. So Carl Rogers would do what you're doing. You would be, if you were the therapist, Jennifer, and I was the client, I would just be talking and you would be listening. And that was kind of the core, the non-directed, therapy of Carl Rogers. What we're doing in the empathy circles, we're taking it out of the therapeutic, just putting it into the mutually relational. And there's no therapist, there's no one, in charge really. There's minimal facilitation. So more of a sense of equality of just human beings trying to listen and hear each other.
Okay, so just again, kind of talking a little more about the roots of empathic listening, and that Carl Rogers had originally kind of developed this in a therapeutic setting as a therapist, obviously. And so what you have done and what the Center for Building Culture of Empathy have done is kind of taken it out of that therapeutic setting and made it more available in kind of a more casual conversational setting for folks.
And there's other processes like imago relationships, which is another, process built on this, but they focused on, romantic relationships, like, partners using this. So that's been another application. And, we're kind of focusing on something for everyone, just anyone, families, work, just something that's really simple. So this is just taking the minimal viable product, to use design, talk is, this is sort of the minimal sort of empathic process is a starting point, but you can do an awful lot with just this process. Yeah.
So you noted that there was kind of another adaptation of empathic listening that was used called Imago for more romantic partnerships. But that obviously, when we look at empathy circles in this context, that it really is kind of a basic or fundamental skill set that can be essentially applied to the masses. So not necessarily in a therapeutic setting, not necessarily be romantic partners, can be casual acquaintances, et cetera, family, but that this is a real kind of basic or fundamental skill set, a good starting point that everyone can access.
Exactly. There's a lot of different processes that were developed on Rogers, empathic listening, and they've gone in a lot of different directions. And when I kind of looked at them, it seemed like this was like the next step from the impact of Rogers' work. And it's sort of been missed. Like I meet people who have done NVC for 10, 15 years, and the simple empathy circle process, they haven't done it. But this is a perfect foundation for NVC. I mean, just getting a lot of practice with this is really going to help in, an NVC, practice.
So you have actually met in your travels and your experiences, you've met a lot of individuals who, for instance, people that are doing NVC trainings and things that had never actually experienced empathy circles. And for you, this fundamental kind of process of empathic listening was kind of the next step of Carl Rogers' work. And it almost, for you, feels like it's been skipped in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Or passed over by folks, like they've moved to maybe a more advanced level without actually kind of having mastered, accomplished, or become familiar with kind of this basic empathic listening skill.
And this is going to help you in all those practices. Yeah. So yeah, I feel fully heard. Thanks.
Great. Victoria, would you be interested in listening? Okay, cool. Well, it's really interesting. I have a tendency to build on kind of what the other participants have said, which is probably, for me, I have experience in dialogue. So kind of following that thread is something that I've kind of been trained to do. So I'll go ahead and let you summarize there.
You're muted.
First lesson of listening.
You were listening, you just can't reflect.
So what I heard you say is that you're excited about this work and around the dialogue, and so I'm listening.
Yeah, and so just kind of building on what Edwin was saying, I had done a lot of work in both my graduate and my doctoral studies, been fascinated with emotional intelligence, and actually had a few professors that challenged me and said, it doesn't exist. You're chasing your tail. And of course, that made me want to dig in even more and prove to them that this was a legitimate concept. As I was doing that, similar to Edwin's experience, what I found is that emotional intelligence is really kind of a higher level skill, very difficult to, especially in a workplace setting, to conduct trainings where people are able to master that higher level skill in, say, a 2 or 3 day workshop.
Yes, so your background and your doctorate degree in emotional intelligence is really key to your interest in this work, and that you also take on a challenge. And when people when people challenge your interest in this area, and so you have been seeking this out.
Yeah, it was definitely a motivator. So as I'm looking at EI and how to make that more accessible, and how to kind of simplify that concept so that it's able to translate for people that maybe don't have as extensive a background in the theory as I do, I boiled it down and I boiled it down and I boiled it down, kind of similar to what Edwin did. And for me, empathy was actually kind of that core fundamental skill set that, for me, emotional intelligence then blossomed out of. So I wanted to shift my focus to the development of empathic skills, and then obviously have emotional intelligence be more kind of a graduate level concept in the workplace.
Yeah, so you have made the connection to what Edwin has talked about, this model, this empathy circle, and how he had, and the work that has been done in and condensing it down, not that it's simple, but that it is a way for more approachable for individuals. And so you're looking at your work and how might you go about doing that too, so that there's a wider platform of individuals who can enter at that level of the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. So awareness of others' emotions obviously is one of the fundamental skills in empathy, in emotional intelligence. Being able to hear them, to understand where it is that they're coming from, is kind of essential to that. So that's just an example of the boiling down.
Yes, Yes. So what you said is this model that we're discussing today around emotional intelligence and empathy and the listening, one of the skills.
Yeah, essential to that concept. Thank you, Victoria. I feel thoroughly heard.
Thank you. So I would like, Sonia, would you like to listen to me?
I would love that, Victoria.
Okay, thank you. So my interest in empathy, I talked a little bit about organizational leadership and in the yin and the yang of systems thinking and design thinking. And it kind of worked for who I was, because I kept saying, this is the way I think around. And so design thinking was really an entry point where I said, wow, the skill around empathy, human-centered design, and having the skills to really think about who you're designing for. And so the more that I looked into, at that time when I looked into design thinking, it really didn't take the approach of really understanding yourself and how you enter into the design. And so that was something that I was interested in. So there were a lot of people doing design work in communities of color, but the way that they were entering, it was not in, they were entering with a lot of self. And even though the human-centered design is around truly listening to what the needs are, who you're designing for, there was still a lot of self-work that needed to be done.
So I'm hearing that you kind of came to this through the lens of systems thinking, design thinking, human-centered design, and realizing that at the core of those practices is an understanding of self, and that this practice of empathy could support that kind of way of thinking about who's your user, who's the human in the human-centered design.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. Also, it was interesting. So as I worked, as you heard, my nephew spent a lot of time with Auntie. So during this time, I volunteered in his classroom, and it was with a teacher who also taught art. And it was a wonderful way to introduce what I had been doing with adults around empathy and listening with students to see how it played out. And it was amazing. I enjoyed it. The young kids, especially the males, were excited that it was like the first time anyone had ever truly listened to them. So there were activities that they did with family members and activities that they also did with their peers. And it was amazing to see how they just took on to the concept of truly leaning in and listening and having empathy for one another.
So I'm hearing that you'd already gotten this experience offering empathy to adults, and then more recently through your nephew had the opportunity to share it through his school, and that it sounds like it was a really kind of rewarding experience to see the way the younger folks, and particularly the boys, kind of took to this practice and the value it had for them.
Right. So that was many years ago, 5th grade. My nephew's now a junior, so it was some time back. So, and interesting enough, I think this the pattern that I see is the joy that I see how it can be applied to many different things. So now that he's a junior, I tried this model with him around listening and to see his interaction, and also thinking about different ways creatively empathy can be used as an introduction to listening, such as drumming. So just this past weekend, introduced that and had a conversation with a master drummer around how might they use listening in part of that, especially with couples.
So I'm hearing that you derive a great sense of personal joy from exploring all the different ways in which empathy and listening can show up, and kind of the creative aspect of whether it's through drumming or in a couples, in a relationship, that it sounds like you're discovering new ways in which this kind of plays out in your life.
Yes, yes. And there's many other ways. I'm also an artist, photographer, graphic designer, jewelry maker. So, and I enjoy music and dance. And so this is a skill that's applicable all throughout. And it's just like finding the ways to connect with people even in my work life. So my work life is around, I'm an associate director for systems equity and workforce, but it's around designing process and designing ways to engage with community and designing ways for us to live out our strategic plan. So we're right in the midst of designing what that's going to be, the mission and the vision and how we connect. So there's other ways that this creativity and empathy plays out.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of creativity in your artistic pursuits, and then also in the kind of design work you're doing in your professional life, and the kind of myriad of ways where you see empathy being applied, or the kind of value of empathy being applied across all these different parts of your life.
Thank you. I felt heard. Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you.
Okay. So now I have listened, I have heard. So who has not gone?
It's Sonia was just listening, so it's her. She chooses who to.
Okay.
You can
Okay.
choose whoever you wish.
Oh,
Good to
okay.
mix it up a little bit. You don't have to
okay.
speak to me, so yeah.
Okay, great. I'll go this way on my screen to Jennifer.
Hey there, Sonia. Happy to listen.
So I guess what's coming up for me a little bit, since this is the first empathy circle I've participated in, some questions around like how much to reflect back, and you know, in NVC training, often it's just one or two words. It's kind of the core, what you think of as the kind of core feeling or core need. Whereas here, I'm seeing and experiencing kind of a much more literal degree of reflection.
Mm-hmm. So what's coming up for you as a result of the experience is, and I'm going to actually demonstrate that now, is maybe a more literal and specific reflection of what's being communicated out, as opposed to, you contrasted it against kind of your experience in NVC trainings and nonviolent communication, that sometimes you may just reflect one or two words to kind of capture what the speaker is actually communicated out. So it's just kind of raised some questions for you about maybe what's appropriate.
Yeah, I think I'm noticing too that I think one impact of the kind of lengthier reflection is that this does start to feel more like dialogue than just one person's turn speaking versus another person's turn speaking.
Mm-hmm. So what you're starting to kind of realize is that this process feels for you more similar to maybe dialogue, and it's maybe more of a conversation as opposed to what you've had experience with before, which is one person speaking followed by another person speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, another difference I'm noticing is that having 4 people as opposed to 2 really changes the dynamic, and that there's an ability to both the kind of opportunity to build off of what someone's talked about before, and the freedom to really stay true to whatever is alive for you in that moment.
Mm-hmm. So again, kind of contrasting this against your experience in NVC, that by having more participants changes the dynamic a little bit, gives you the opportunity to maybe either build off of what somebody else has actually communicated, or to go off on your own and speak about a topic that's kind of alive or real for you.
Yeah, and it, I'm just feeling quite grateful for having this experience, because when I watched the video, the introductory video, I wasn't quite sure about this idea of having a topic, because that was something completely new to me. And so now getting to see the way in which a topic kind of unifies the kind of disparate conversations that are happening. It's really interesting to kind of get to experience this.
So getting from you that you're intrigued by this, that you're grateful by having for having the experience. You had actually viewed the video previously and weren't quite sure how it was going to work, having a topic, but have actually found that it's been kind of neat to see how it's unified the conversations and the different participants and how they communicate.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the last thing I want to share is just how interesting it is to have witnesses to a conversation. So that's something else that's new for me right now, where often in a conversation, I think about the speaker and the listener. And here, in addition to the speaker and the active listener, there's just this experience that not only am I kind of talking, feeling heard, but there's also two other folks just witnessing that process and kind of, I'm just noticing the newness of that experience for me.
Okay, so again, I'm hearing from you kind of this discovery of something new, and this process again, kind of going back to the number of participants involved, that in contrast with your normal communication, probably with your empathy partner, that not only do you have an active speaker and an active listener, but you have a couple of other people that are kind of in the room that are witnessing this conversation, and that's been different, not necessarily good or bad, but different.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I feel heard.
Cool. All right, Edwin, would you listen to me?
Yes, listening.
So I keep trying not to build and go off on my own, but it just seems that whatever somebody has said before sparks something in me. So this idea of empathic listening versus dialogue versus one thing I'd like to talk about, which is parroting back. I'll let you go, Edwin.
Yeah, so you're on one hand, you'd like to build on what others are saying, and then on the other, maybe say some things of your own sort of ideas. And you're wanting to talk about the reflections about parroting back, the sort of something about that.
Yeah, and I think just kind of for me, this internal struggle, in my experience, I've had people, especially in the workplace, who have, I wouldn't say necessarily been trained in empathic listening, but maybe active listening, have had short courses and things like that, or they come back from a half-day training and you know, what you get is, I hear what you're saying is, and it's literally regurgitation verbatim of what I've said. And to me, it almost feels on the verge of patronizing sometimes, when someone doesn't really seem like emotionally invested or connected, but they're literally just, again, repeating verbatim what it is that I've communicated out. That connection is missing.
Mm-hmm. So you find that when people are just, they've maybe taken a course in active listening and they come back to the work environment and they just do this sort of reflection that's just sort of a parroting, and you don't feel that it has the felt understanding in it, and maybe it feels patronizing to you.
Yeah, and so in a sense that I've been heard, but I haven't really been listened to or understood. And I think for me, that's a dramatic difference. And I think one of the things when I was studying Rogers was the need to have that kind of more authentic connection versus something that was maybe disingenuine, similar to kind of the experiences that I've shared. And how do we find that balance? Because when I was listening to Sonia reflect back, I thought, I wish, and I know that I'm not supposed to be having these internal judgments, but we're human, and so it's inevitable. And so I'm thinking here that I wish I could do a better job of that, and maybe not be as precise or as deliberate in my reflections.
Oh, okay. So when you were hearing, just see Bill got kicked out of his room. I just got to move him over. So I'm doing two things here, management. So yeah, so you were hearing Sonia do her reflections, and it seems like it was more of a felt sensitivity to it. And it sounds like you would kind of like to be able to do that more than just the direct kind of word for word reflection, and because that
Yeah.
can be sometimes uncomfortable for people. Or
Yeah, and that I don't want to be a parrot. At the same time, I think that there are some people that maybe feel as speakers that want to be felt, and there may be other people that want to feel like they've been listened to. So I think I need to keep in mind that individuals may need something different from me as a listener, and to try to be mindful of that in those interactions.
so in these interactions, you want to be mindful that the speaker is wanting to be heard in different ways. Maybe they like to be sort of just parroted, or maybe they want another way. So trying to be sensitive to what it is that they're wanting.
Yeah. So thank you, Edwin. I feel fully heard.
Okay, thanks. Speak to Victoria then. Yeah, this is, I love this conversation, sort of looking at all the nuances of the listening. So I'm really enjoying this. Yeah, really enjoying this conversation and the insights that I'm hearing. You're muted still.
I constantly do that, so I apologize. So what I hear you saying is you are enjoying what you're hearing and the nuances, and that you're just a lifelong learner.
Lifelong learner and enjoying it. And it is what I think where Jennifer came to is it's about the speaker feeling heard to their satisfaction, right? It's like, sometimes they feel heard just having the words reflected back. They want to hear words that they've said reflected back to them. Other times they're kind of really enjoying, appreciating someone going a little bit deeper and naming a feeling that they may not have really spoken, but that the listener is really kind of picking up, and hearing that reflection, it just feels really good too. Yeah.
Right. So what I hear you say is that we as people are different. And so, and what you're listening for is, or trying to see, is that how are people responding, and what do they need? And so that's a great way to lean into that. Yes, what I hear you saying.
Yeah, exactly. And Jennifer was talking about, I got these judgments. She had these judgments. The thing is, with an empathy circle, you can share your judgments. It's not like NBC that you have to struggle, like I have to speak from my feelings and needs. It's like, be judgmental. Your judgments will be heard by the other person. So I try to make it, really clear that you can say whatever you want, however you want. And I think that takes a little bit of the burden off of how you speak. And over time, you just kind of get past those judgments. When you start feeling heard, you kind of, those judgments kind of fall away, and we kind of see what, maybe it's like frustration someone's trying to share in their judgments, and that gets heard, and then kind of it's like the onion kind of peels away to kind of a deeper truth.
Yes, what I hear you saying is that this process is built on people just releasing those judgments so that they can share, and that they're free to share. And so you just, and what I heard you say is that just how freeing that is for people. Yeah.
So, so let's see. So all the things that you learn in NVC about naming feelings and needs, I mean, all that stuff is great. And I think that, like to have some modules, more advanced modules where we bring that in, how do we actually practice, from the empathy circle, how do we practice kind of going deeper? So that's something I definitely would like to, design.
Okay. So you're thinking about, what you just said was that you're thinking about different levels of taking this empathy circle, and what might that look like in design for another way to engage, and looking at the model that Sonia has mentioned, the nonviolence model, as perhaps something to look into.
Yeah, and I've done some of our circles, we do mirrored feeling. So what is it that I'm feeling? And you turn that into emotion, and everybody mirrors it, right? So it's like another way of kind of getting those feelings expressed. So there's a lot of, for the, future trainings that we can develop. But this basic empathy circle, I think it's especially, I was so thrilled, Jennifer, when you mentioned how you came to empathy being the core of like emotional intelligence. That was my experience too, that it's really empathy, this core kind of practice. So I really resonated and got excited. Oh, somebody else thought of that too.
So you're continuing to think about new ways to develop this work, and you're making connections to what Jennifer and her experiences, and just you're thinking creative. You talked about the mirroring, and so you're just thinking about creative ways.
And especially with your work on human-centered design, it's actually called Empathic Design by some. I've seen articles and even a book called Empathic Design. So it's really the core of the whole hearing people, connecting to people is sort of the core of designing, solutions. So this goes in so many different directions and is so fundamental. Yeah.
Yes. So what I hear is just the excitement of the many different directions that empathy and it can go in design. And so yes, I hear your excitement.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Yeah, thank you.
So let's see here. Who has? Edwin, would you listen?
Okay, listening.
Okay. So all of this, just listening to everyone, it is exciting, and listening to Edwin's excitement and Jennifer's excitement and Sonia's excitement about this work and different possibilities. And so this whole idea around designing for what else. And I'm excited about just the possibilities of talking to other people who do this work or who are interested in this kind of work, because it gets all those synapses firing. And so I am trying to really focus and say, what now what? And so what has really inspired me is all that has been going on around race issues, and issues of our leadership of our government, and just that empathy is something that is missing right now, and that this is a crisis. And so I'm just thinking, okay, we're in a crisis mode. And what is it that I need to do? What is my part? If I have talents or gifts or my why in my life, what am I doing in this arena? And I need to step up. So that's where I'm at right now.
So you really want to share where you are at this moment, and you're hearing the excitement from other people here, and you're checking your excitement too. And it's about seeing, you're looking for what you can do next and where your excitement is leading you to. And you're seeing the issues around racism, kind of just the problems within society, and wanting to really address and maybe design some, solutions, constructive solutions. And you're just seeing that this is really missing in society in general. We're in crisis mode. Yeah, this is a crisis.
Right. And so, so I'm thinking about what part do I play in this world, and what can I do? And even if it's a small part, it may lead to someone else doing something even more. So now is the time for me to step up and figure this out. So I'm here to say, hey, how might I help? What can I do? And how might I be a constant learner? So.
Yeah, so you're wanting to step up and see how you can contribute, how you can help, and how you can also grow and learn. And even if you just do a piece, others can build on that piece too. So if you contribute a piece, others can build on that.
Right. Yeah, and I think Edwin, as you were talking about how it's connected to all these things, I see that, and I've always been this systems thinker, so I always see how it's connected. And empathy is that core part. And I've heard some people say, oh, you do that so well, or, I'm like, that's something I work on. It's a choice. Empathy is a choice. And it's something that we have to learn. So not all the time do I get it right for leaning in and listening to people. So So I think that, but it's something that's a choice, and I know it's something that you have, it's ongoing.
So you're saying that empathy, going down that empathic route, is a choice, and it's an ongoing learning, and and it can be learned or deepened.
Yes.
Or
Yes. And I see the power. So when I've done sessions with adults and I do these creative kind of activities, people are in tears, or they brings up certain emotions, and as a person, you have to be ready for that, because even in diverse circles of people from different cultures, it has an impact on how just listening and how someone listening to them or seeing them. So and then for children, so I see how it can actually, how it changes people and how people connect to this empathy part. And so and you're right on, the world needs more of this. So
yeah, so you're seeing the power of empathy in the sense that people actually go into tears when they're heard, and you have to also maybe have some skills or to be able to hold some of those feelings that come up.
right. And so you talked about this being like this first level, this entry point for people. And so I'm excited to hear more about what the next level looks like for engagement.
Yeah, so you heard me just talk about the empathy circle being a first step, and you're wondering what are the next steps beyond that. So some
Right.
curiosity about that.
Okay, I thank you. I felt heard.
Great. Sonia, I'll speak to you. Yeah, the empathy circle is a first step. It's one of those 20-80 rules where 20% of the work gets you 80% of the way. And I see empathy circles like that doing the empathy circle, you can do a lot with it.
So I'm hearing you kind of acknowledge what Victoria was talking about the empathy circle being the first step, but also that just that one step, first step, gets you really far. So 20% of the work gets you 80% of the benefit.
So some of the benefits is just for mutual support, just being heard feels good. So it's just a context for mutual support is a first step, and that's like ongoing. You never can get enough. It's like life is ongoing. We need mutual support. So just this practice, just like with your empathy buddy, that's like a mutual support. This is also ongoing mutual support that you don't need too much more beyond that. Just having this mutual support as an ongoing basis is very helpful.
So I'm hearing one of the benefits that you've identified is that these circles create a space for mutual support, and that's something we all need for the entirety of our lives, that the need for that is kind of never ending.
And another is just sort of team building, or even in the family, just when people feel heard, it's kind of heading off conflicts, before they happen, because they sort of bubble up into the awareness and they get sort of resolved while they're still, still small. So it can be very helpful for heading off conflicts. But then once a conflict does happen and everyone is familiar with the empathy circle, you can say, oh, let's bring this into an empathy circle. And you have a container for holding the conflict. So it's like by itself, it'll hold a lot of conflict.
So hearing two other benefits, and you mentioned this in the context of family, one being this ability to kind of preemptively deal with, conflict before it becomes big C conflict, because it's giving folks space to share whatever is bubbling up inside of them, and then kind of creating a framework or a container for that you can bring in once conflict actually has arisen.
Yeah, so what just learning this skill, building trust in it, then it becomes sort of a fallback, right? It's like people are talking, a conflict comes up, you can say, oh, this conflict can we do an empathy circle? So you've got something off the shelf that you already have trust in, and you can kind of address, hold that conflict. And there's a lot of other tools, and that would be one of the trainings, is what are tools to strengthen that conflict resolution process. And that's what I would call a restorative empathy circle. So that would be a whole module, that for deepening that training of holding and facilitating conflict.
So hearing you kind of think of the empathy circle as a tool for kind of supporting conflict resolution, and that when you trust the tool and when you trust the empathy circle, it can accomplish a lot. And there can be all these other tools, which might be other modules, like restorative empathy circles being one of them.
Yeah, and then there's the design part, which is, I've done a bunch with human-centered design and empathic design. I have a whole website, which I'd love to share with Victoria. Have done, IDEOs training. I'm here in the Bay Area, been to, Stanford and the design school. And the first part of human-centered design is you have to empathize with people you're designing for, or even the co-design, you kind of empathize with each other. And I think that brings in what Victoria is talking about is, who are we? What are we bringing into this design? And so it's this listening to each other to kind of hear problems and have the tools of defining what the problem is, having some tools for creating for creative solutions, and then for, prototyping solutions and testing them. So it's again, using this as a gateway for creativity and innovation.
So hearing that, similar to Victoria, you're interested in how this can play out in human-centered design or empathic design, and the kind of empathy, whether with the client or with the co-designer, as kind of this, again, starting point for identifying problems, brainstorming solutions, prototyping, the kind of processes that come afterwards in design work.
Yes, feel very heard. Thank you.
Victoria, will you be my listener?
Certainly.
So, yeah, just feeling really excited right now. Kind of feels like a lot of bubbling possibility coming up. And I kind of love this idea of that Edwin spoke of like creating a space that both can preemptively kind of cut off or kind of address conflict before it escalates, and then also in doing so you're building trust in a practice that then can be applied later on. So just, yeah, feeling really excited about that.
Yes, I heard you say that you're excited and you love the ideas and the possibilities that are coming to your mind about your work, and how this could be seen as a preemptive way to mitigate some of the issues and problems that might come up.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think another kind of thought that's still formulating is going back to what Jennifer was talking about with like different types of reflections. And for me, the word that was coming up a little bit is care. Like this, that sometimes if someone just repeats back word for word, I think it can feel, for me as a speaker, like a robotic process without the emotional care behind really wanting to, the kind of the care that is wanting to understand what someone's sharing.
Right. You just shared the way that you would like responses to when people hear you, and you use the word care. And in that word of care, it is in the sensitivity that one has when they say, I hear you, and that they're listening to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's, maybe I brought that, or maybe that came to mind just now, because as I think through possibilities and kind of this idea of why a tool would work preemptively and to resolve conflict. I think part of what's happening is having the felt experience, trusting that other people in the room care about my own experience, care about what I have to share, and kind of the ability to release a little bit of the anxiety that often comes up in moments of tension or conflict or difficult conversation, because you have the trust that someone cares.
Right. So you're thinking about how might a tool help in the process of when people come together to share, that helps in that part where people feel like they're being listened to and that there's care in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, and just kind of, I mean, I guess I'm like deconstructing a little bit what's happening here, but it just is really that it actually requires care to be the active speaker. You have to listen really well, and you have to care enough about what the other person's saying to be able to reflect it back to them. And so there's something in that kind of requirement of reflection that is kind of simultaneously training to reflect back with care, and giving the speaker the felt experience of what it means to be on the receiving end of care.
Right. So you're still reflecting, and you're still thinking about what that is, and what that looks like, and the skill that it takes. And what I hear you saying is that it does take some kind of action skill to be able to truly listen to someone, and for them to be able to feel, for the other person to feel they're listening.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I haven't studied this, but I know like pop psychology of like fight, flight, freeze responses. And I just think, in my work, I see dialogue or conversation break down so often when folks go into one of those places. And yeah, there's something really, I'm just feeling really curious about, like, what about this process feels really like slow enough and spacious enough to not maybe I just actually am curious about what it would look like to go through this process with people who are really triggered. Because right now we're talking about something that I actually don't feel, I have a lot of spaciousness in me talking about this issue.
You are what I hear you saying is, how might this be applicable to my work? And you're thinking about the individuals you work with and the type of work, and how might people, how might this create barriers to the conversation, or for those who want to retreat from the conversation. So you're thinking about, how are you going to apply this, and what might that look like?
Yeah, thanks. I feel really heard.
Okay, so this is where in the process I always say, I feel as if I've talked so much that, and I'm to ask someone right now if they will listen to me. So in the process, when you feel like, can you pass when,
what you can do is you can select someone, and you can, so the first is always to select someone that you can say, well, I feel fully heard. And then that sort of passes it on. Then they'll say, okay, you feel fully heard. And then it's their turn. Or you can say, I have nothing else to say. And they'll reflect back, I have nothing left to say, or whatever.
Maybe I should work on that issue and have somebody listen to me. Jackie, Jackie, would you like to listen?
Sure.
Jennifer or Jackie? Wait, Jennifer or Jackie?
I'm the only J in the room, so I figured I would respond either way. It's Jennifer.
Jennifer, okay. Okay, so
You want me to reflect on what you shared actually with Edwin? Because it was interesting.
Yes, go ahead and reflect what you heard.
I get from you, I'm kind of sensing kind of an awkwardness or a discomfort, almost as if you feel like you've kind of said what you need to say, and you feel like you've kind of said enough at this point. You don't really want to abandon the process, but how to kind of, what do you do or what do you say at that moment when that comes up for you in an empathy circle? How do we manage that?
What I was trying to communicate is that I'm usually the person listening.
Okay.
And so, and so sometimes I'm always balancing how much I talk versus listening. And so, and I didn't set in my mind that we're going to keep going around and around. And so for me, I really love listening and leaning in and listening. So.
Okay, so I completely botched, obviously, my first attempt at trying to reflect back what you're communicating. So I appreciate you clarifying that for me. So you are comfortable and most commonly in the role of listener. And so in a situation like this, where we go round robin and you found yourself actually having to speak to the participants more than one time, you actually are feeling like you might want to take a back seat and take the role of listener again, because that's something that's maybe more comfortable and more familiar with you than being an active speaker.
Yes, I feel fully heard.
Good. So, well, I guess to appease your need and your want, I'm going to ask you if you'll be my listener then, Victoria.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, because I want to fully satisfy that need. So this is, it's been interesting. I think there's also, and I don't know, I feel like I'm kind of sensing it. There's this level of curiosity, almost a level of maybe frustration with some of us. I think individuals that kind of come to a group like this are maybe better versed in ideas of empathy, empathic communication. And so we feel this need to kind of take it to the next level. And, I'm hearing kind of questions with Edwin, like, okay, so how do we develop and kind of go beyond this? And so for me, it's kind of like, I feel like I want to go deeper and I want to move into dialogue and I want to, figure out how we're going to take this into, okay, as opposed to kind of venting into more of a constructive conflict resolution mode. But remembering that the individuals I'm going to be introducing this to are experiencing this for the first time.
So what I hear you saying is that individuals who are coming to learn more about the Empathy Circle, they come from, their experiences are vast and their levels of interest and engagement are different. And that some are like yourself, and like you said, Ed, was wanting to take it to another level. But then you're thinking, well, why was it designed in the first place? And who might we be creating these empathy circles for? And where are they in that stage? Yes.
Yeah, so I'm feeling internally, I'm just recognizing kind of this need for restraint. Mm-hmm. At the same idea, I think I am completely fascinated every time I participate in one of these, that even through a process of reflection, that we're able to establish connections, even in a virtual environment.
So so you're here and you're learning about the process, and you're saying to yourself how you're pulling back, saying, okay, you're leaning into what is happening now in the process, even though who you are wants to go deeper into the next level of engagement that this design may take or go towards.
Yeah, that level of restraint I think is important to stay in this space. It'll be interesting to see how we identify when we feel like we need to move on to another module, to another level, how we identify when that time is right for everyone, because obviously it won't be the same for everyone.
Right, so you're interested in what the next module might be, and what's the whole timing and when and how that's going to transition from this, what we're doing now, to what may be.
Yeah, I think I've been kind of just working through in my mind some of the things that Sonia was talking about. And I think for me, two of the things that really come up with the empathy circles, obviously, is as a listener, it's a deliberate involvement or engagement in that process. And you are creating a space, and you are creating essentially a safe space, in the sense that, as much as sometimes I'm frustrated by the idea of having to reflect back and not being able to elaborate on or share my own feelings or reactions about, I understand the reasons that I need to exercise that level of restraint and follow the model, because that is me not having that level of involvement as an active listener is what creates, I think, that safe space for the speaker. And for me, I think that is what's crucial, because without that safe space, I think what Sonia had mentioned is this idea of fight or flight or freeze. That's where I go if I'm not safe or I feel threatened.
Okay, so you have tied into what you heard Sonia say about the safe space, and you're saying how you as an individual and how you're putting the kind of a restraint on yourself for holding back and working through this model because you see the benefits of it, and that's one way that it helps to start to create safe space for others.
I think being an objective listener, I think, is crucial to this process, because I think when someone feels judgment, that violates that safe space. And if they don't feel safe, they're not going to do the deeper level of sharing or share their truth, which is really, in order for us to make any progress, whether it be on work conflicts or social issues, we need to be able to speak our truth and have that be heard.
Right. And so what I hear you saying is that this process and how it's built is really around creating that safe space for people to really go deeper in what they are willing to share and understand about themselves, and how important that is.
Thank you, Victoria. I feel fully heard, and I hope that you enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Now you can select someone else as a listener and then tell them that you don't want to talk again.
Sonia, Sonia, will you listen?
Yes, Victoria.
I'd like to talk about doing and moving and things sometimes when you don't feel comfortable in doing them. And I will talk about the next level and the experience that I just had when doing this exercise with my nephew. So we were working on, I was going through the model, had watched the video, and I said, okay, so I modeled what was supposed to happen. And he was just so eager just to tell me what I had done wrong, right? I said, no. This is not the time. And so then as I'm listening, he says, well, aren't you going to give me feedback on what I'm supposed to do? I said, no. I'm just listening. And so he's like, okay. I said, this is just listening. I said, this process right now is about listening. I said, now there's some other processes. I said, maybe later Auntie can tell you all the things you need to do. I said, but right now I'm just listening, fully listening so you can be heard. And that was like this kind of like, oh, okay. Because normally what I do is I will listen, and then I'll go into, okay, now you need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and give it. So that kind of experience, just to take the time just to listen to what someone has to say and not immediately go into trying to solve it for them, but giving that break. So I actually gave it a full day break, and then the next day said, hey, you want to talk? So now that I knew all the issues and what he was thinking about. You want to
yeah. Sounds like that you've kind of identified what a next step in your process has been for you, which is this experience with your nephew, and using this model with him to really create space for listening in both directions, and to make sure that that listening process happened fully before going into the how do we fix this.
Right. And so as I think about this model, and when people come together in a circle, they won't necessarily have the opportunity to go back to those individuals who listen to them, to continue that conversation. And so I was just thinking about that process in the stages of how do you set people up now that you've opened up and they've shared. And they're looking, some people come to these circles looking for solutions. So people have different expectations. And so, but the power in just having someone hear you can be a power for that other person to move for action. So that's what I'm thinking about this model and the next steps.
So kind of noting a difference between the experience with your nephew where you have some continuous relationship versus sometimes with these circles where there might not be a kind of predetermined way to continue the connection. And then I also heard you noting that even just in being heard, that can motivate someone to kind of take action and move towards solution.
Good, yes. Thank you. I feel heard. Thank you.
So we just have 2 minutes before we go back to the full group. So we could just have 2 minutes for kind of open comments or anything you'd like to, without reflection. I would add one thing to what you were just saying, Victoria, is that the empathic listening that Carl Rogers did, he called it non-directed listening. So it's like he would for an hour just listen to the clients and give no advice, nothing. And in that space, you get heard, and sort of the solutions come up in the speaker, right? Whatever their problems is, they start hearing their solutions. They get them, not their solutions, but their problems or whatever. They see it reflected, and they're able to come up with their own solutions. So I think that to a degree, it's non-directed here as well, that people kind of have a space to come up. Yeah, so anyway.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone else wants to jump in, you should feel free.
I have a question maybe, which is that I'm curious how the different experience between doing this among kind of strangers versus folks who know each other really well, like you were talking about family members, and if it's easier to reflect back to somebody who you don't have a lot of predetermined ideas about, and kind of, I don't know if you all have experiences kind of with the challenge of doing this with folks who know each other more intimately.
I usually find that people want to tell you all the things that you've done wrong in that time of listening, because now they have you captured and you're listening, truly listening to them, but no.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, it definitely is more challenging, because I think that, you know, when you are meeting strangers, you don't have, I mean, even that, I have preconceived notions and things, maybe just based on, you know, what's on your wall and what you're wearing and if you have an accent. But I think that I bring a lot of baggage in terms of my interpersonal relationship with people that I know really well. So setting that aside or having it take a back seat so I can really be fully present and not add color and flavor to everything that they're sharing with me, for me is much more challenging than doing it with people that I have not personal relationships with, maybe work relationships with, or strangers.
Yeah, and the family, the dynamics are kind of set, and it's kind of hard to kind of change how we're going to listen to each other. So it can be a challenge. We got 10 seconds. We're going to be going back to the full group. So thank you everyone for a really enjoyable.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back everyone. We have about 10 minutes just to go around, and for each person to, you know, take a minute, up to a minute, to just share how was that experience. And I'll maybe just start. We talked a lot about the nature of the empathy circle, you know, so the insights about how it works. And I always really enjoy those conversations to sort of illuminate, you know, the qualities of the empathy of the process. So I really quite enjoy that. Bill, do you want to go and then also call on people?
Sure. I wanted to reflect what Edwin said. Yes, we talked a lot, but we focused a little bit on silence, you know, just sitting in silence with someone. And I just find that was just something that was worth experiencing. So I really appreciated when we were sitting in silence, among the other things. Victoria?
Yes. Oh, I so enjoyed the conversations and just listening. Well, listening in, it felt like conversation. Listening in to individuals. A lot of talk about empathy in the work that we do, how we engage, and kind of thinking about what does this look like in our work and then the next level, perhaps. But the importance of being in the now in our work right now.
Okay, thanks a lot, Victoria. Jennifer?
Yeah, again, I mean, I think echoing everybody's enjoyment and the reward of the process. I think one thing that I feel in the moment, and I was feeling during our breakout session, is just pride that and hope. I think that there are people from all around the world that understand the importance of this, that want to get involved. And I mean, Victoria was really good at articulating it, but just kind of feeling this need to make a contribution to society and an urgency about that, and kind of understanding or trying to identify, you know, what can my role be? What can I bring? What do I have to offer? And how can I, you know, leave the world in a better place than kind of its current state? So I just appreciate that.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. Karen?
Yeah, I think you stole my point, Bill, about the silence. That was lovely. There was a moment where one of the participants was just silent, and sitting with them was just, there's something about the energy. And we talked a lot about that kind of beautiful kind of oneness energy that comes through in empathy circles, which is so powerful. Yeah, just recognize as well that importance for humanity. And I can't wait to get into the kind of more content stuff we were doing. I was kind of torn. I was talking about being torn between doing process and then having this world of stuff to explore. But that'll come in time, and I'm very excited about that.
Thanks, Karen. Great, thank you. Sonia.
Thank you.
Yeah, just feeling excited about my first experience with the Empathy Circle, and the kind of sense of possibility that I think some other folks mentioned about how all the different places in life where this might apply, and kind of this being a tool that can be applied in so many different places and with so many different groups of people. So just feeling that sense of possibility.
Great, thank you, Sonia. Lucy?
Yeah, thank you for this first experience. Also, on my end, the conclusion that I come to is, like, once I heard that a good interviewer is a person who will interview somebody and not have to interrupt them or ask any questions, because the person is going to be so comfortable. They're just going to go on speaking and feel they have all the space to speak, so that it'll just generate, you know, more of their own expression. And so I would apply that to a good facilitator, is someone that doesn't have to facilitate the circle, because the person has a way of containing the space that makes everybody feel so comfortable that everything just flows by itself, and it builds into one spirit, one group, one person, one heart, one people.
Great, thanks, Lucy. Michelle?
Yeah, I really appreciated, like, that circle. Like, it felt like the start of a journey. And it felt really important. Like, I really appreciated the people that were in the room and what it kind of evolved from it. And yeah, I felt really moved by it. So it was really nice to be able to use the process to learn about the process. Love it. That's really cool. So yeah, I'm looking forward to what's ahead. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Michelle. And Edwin?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So next steps this Friday is again an empathy cafe. Well, we'll go directly into the circle. So there won't be an introduction into the training. We'll just talk about, we'll be talking about the why of a culture of empathy, as I mentioned. So the next step is that it's not just the process, the empathy circle that we're talking about. It's what happens in the empathy circle is we create a little culture of empathy, and it's that culture that we want to take out to the wider world. And how do we design, processes and to take that out into the world? For example, one thing we have is an empathy tent, which you saw in that video. We set up at some of these political rallies where the political right and left are, battling it out, like here in Berkeley. We set up the empathy tent to offer listening to both sides. And then we try to bring the sides together into an empathy circle to talk about the different issues. And one thing I would like to do is take the empathy tent and set up in front of the White House and say, hey, whoever is president, we would like you to do an empathy circle, or set it up in front of the Congress to do empathy circles, between the sides. So it's a larger vision, really, but it's like we have a basic tool for that. And so we'll be talking about that on Friday, and then we'll have these orientation cafes on Tuesdays, starting again October 13th. Next week, we have the cohort, that cohort 5 that we're holding. And then we'll also see if about how many people are wanting to take part, setting up other cohorts as well. So it's sort of dynamic when we set those up, but the next one will be kind of the end of October, beginning of November will be another cohort, but we might set one up in between too. So if you just keep watching that web, the Facebook group, all the information gets posted there. So just kind of, you can track it there. So that's it for our time. We went 2 hours, and want to thank you all for taking part, and look forward to seeing you in the next Empathy Circle and the training. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. It was really nice meeting you.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh.
Goodbye.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.